Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. On behalf of Imam Tariq El-Amin, resident Imam of Masjid Al-Taqwa, the Ta'aleem Committee Chair, Dr. Aisha El-Amin, the committee members, Dr. Lionel Allen Jr., myself, Rashida Fitzpatrick, and Dr. Gloria, I want to welcome you to today's Ta'aleem. We will be discussing PhD candidates Carla James' dissertation, What Do Parents Expect? Teachers' Perception of Role Dissonance and Parental Expectations. Let me tell you a little bit about Ms. James. Carla James is an educator and an advocate dedicated to supporting students with disabilities. Currently pursuing a PhD in special education, she transitioned into teaching after a successful 15-year career in human resources, following a deep calling to work with students with disabilities in K-12 special education. In addition to her work in public education, she has also taught at the University of Illinois, Chicago, UIC, where she has helped prepare future educators for the field. As a mother to a 14-year-old daughter, she understands the importance of individualized support and strives to create an equitable learning environment. With a unique blend of corporate leadership experience and academic expertise. She is committed to fostering meaningful educational experiences that empower students of all abilities. Well, good afternoon,
Yes, good
PhD
afternoon.
candidate Carla James.
Yes, that's me.
Been working hard.
Yes, yes, long time coming. It has been a
Yes.
long time coming for sure. Yeah. But I'm at
So,
the end. I'm at the end.
yes, thank God. What made you decide to pursue a doctoral degree?
So I am a career changer and I started my career in human resources, and after my having my daughter, I decided that just wasn't where my passions lie. I need to do something different. And so I went back to get my master's in special ed. And in doing so, as part of the master's program, you have to do all these practicums where you go out and you observe in different environments to kind of get a better understanding of how special education is applied in different settings and spaces and places. And as I observed more, I kept feeling like I don't know enough, like I don't know enough. And I kept saying, like, should I go back and get my bachelor's in education? Should I go back and get my bachelor's in SPED? And everyone who I encountered said, no, no, you'll be fine. You learn on the field. And you do. You learn a lot. Education is boots to the ground. Like you learn by fire. You learn by going through it. However, I just felt like I needed to know more. I still felt like I didn't have enough of a background to truly make the impacts that I wanted to. I just needed to better understand, how we got to where we are in special education, what we need to do to move forward, what's impeding us from being able to do the things that seem so simple on paper, in theory, but in reality, it's not that easy. So that's kind of what kind of piqued my interest to go back and to learn more. And then the rest of it was God's plan because I just happened to be in the right place, the right time, right situation, right meeting, and everything just really kind of fell into place from there.
Yes, I can definitely attest that it was God's timing because I was
Yes.
I was with you when you were just talking about paying for it out of your pocket, and
Yeah.
then
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
what seemed like um something that was a setback was really a setup, it appeared.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was nothing but God's work. So I could definitely attest to that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
um, you mentioned that you were in corporate America. What made you
Mm-hmm.
decide to transition from corporate America to education field? Because you don't
Mm-hmm.
hear a lot of people saying, I want to be a teacher. Usually you
Right.
say, I could never be a teacher. Or, that's the hardest job in the world. I would never do that. And hats
Mm-hmm.
off. So you had a healthy career. So what made you
Mm-hmm.
change?
Yeah, yeah. Or you hear the opposite where teachers are like, I'm leaving this. I'm going to corporate America. Like, forget this. It's for
Yes.
the birds, right? Yeah, no, my running joke is that I was tired of working with adults who acted like children, so I'm going to go work with kids, right?
Okay.
And it's a
Okay.
joke, but there's a lot of truth in that joke too. I worked in human resources, and my job entailed working with managers and leaders on how to manage their workforce. And oftentimes they make decisions based on emotion, not based on process, procedure, law, rule, things that are going to keep them from out of the courthouse, not being sued. And I also worked in a very young, sales-driven technology company, very youthful. A lot of my managers were really young, and they were just headstrong, and they just, they want to do what they want to do. And it's like they would walk in my office, and say, "Okay, Carla, I fired him on Friday," and I'm like, first off, it's Tuesday. Second off, like, what? Do we have any documentation to support that? Like, what are we doing? And they're like, I don't know, just help me fix it. And I'm like, oh, that's not how this works. Like, that's not how this works, right? So it's just a lot of that. And it just became frustrating. And then after having my daughter, I had an opportunity to take a step back and really think about, is this what I want my life to be? Like, is this bringing me joy? Am I happy in what I do? And I realized that whatever I did, whatever took me away from my child had to be fulfilling enough that it made sense for me. And at that
Mhm.
time, just having that really raw conversation with myself and with God, it was that role wasn't fulfilling anymore, not in the way that it had in the past. And so I
Mhm.
just sat and I thought, and I said, okay, what do I want to do? Like, what would I like to do? And that's when I decided to go back to get my master's in special ed.
Okay. So speaking about your dissertation, that was what you uh, said was a mouthful. Um,
Mhm.
what I mean, but at the heart of it is like, what do parents expect? Is
Mhm.
really, the meat and potatoes of it. What was the most surprising thing that you found out from reviewing the literature leading up to your pilot study on parent involvement?
Mhm. Sure. So the review of the literature basically shared or revealed to me that parents do. So, okay, let me take a step back because the perception in education is that parents don't care. Right. I remember when I first started working in Chicago public schools and I was just frustrated by something. And I had a coworker say, well, they don't care. They don't care if their kids come to school. They don't care if their kids get educated. They don't care. They don't care. And that's an underlying perception, especially in inner city schools in low socioeconomic areas, is that parents just don't care about education. It's not important to them. But the literature says the exact opposite, though. It says that they absolutely do care. It's just that how they show their value in education may not be perceived as caring, or may not be one. It may not even be seen. Like teachers may not see what parents do outside of the school system to support their children. It may be as simple as, I'm going to choose to pay the light bill before I buy shoes, even though the shoes are too small on my feet, because I know my kids need light to get up, go to work, go to school, do their homework, do whatever, right? It may be as simple and basic as that, but they are making choices that they feel impact their child's success in some way, shape, or form. The review of the literature also revealed that parents, they want to be collaborators, but they feel as if there's no opportunity for them to do that, especially when they come in already feeling behind the eight ball, like they don't know anything, as if the people on the other side of the table are the experts when they're really not. And whenever I run an IEP meeting, I always start with, we're going to save the parents' voice for last because it's the most important. Like, you know more about your kid than we will ever know. Right.
Hmm.
And they don't really see that as being value add. But to me, that trumps anything that I could possibly say, because I'm just saying something that came out of a book most of the time, right? But I want to talk about your kid. I want to see how we can help them. And their voice is very important in that. And that comes through. There's a lot of different studies that talk about different parenting models and traditional models of parenting and, parent involvement and how that looks like in education. And a lot of our parents just don't fit those traditional models, but it doesn't mean that they're not involved or that they don't want to be or they're not trying the best that they can. The other really big point, too, was taking into consideration their own experiences with education. I think that was probably the most enlightening for me, was understanding that they themselves may not have had an easy walk through education. It may have been hard for them. Like I have, even my colleagues or other parents tell me, oh, I was the bad kid. I was the kid always sent home. I was the kid always making trouble. I barely made it through. I didn't even graduate. I got my GED or whatever because they kicked me out. So understanding their perceptions of education and what that feels like, was it a warm and comforting place for them when they were young? Like that really does make an impact in how they show up in the school system. And sometimes it's just a matter of gaining their trust and getting them to understand that we have the same objective, which is to support your student in the best way possible. And, sometimes they just need to see that you truly do care. I think that's for me has been the biggest aha that I had through this process. And it has brought me the best relationships that I have with parents now, having that kind of framework as I start to build relationships with them.
Now, I'm going to give you a little pushback on that. Now, I
Mhm.
understand literature, and then there's the reality, because I've been
Mhm.
teaching for 20 plus years.
Mhm.
And we've discussed this before, where I see more and more of a decline. And I'm in a suburban school, South suburban school, and the demographics they're a lot different than what you may be facing in CPS. But I really see a lot of students who I guess I'll just say this. I had one it's been brought to my attention that at least two students parents have just withdrawn their students from school, period,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they see that their child is not following the program. And one parent says, I just know my daughter has so much of is going to keep getting herself in trouble, so I'm just going to
Mhm.
homeschool her. I had one student who, as a freshman, was having difficulty showing up to school every day. And then the second semester came of his sophomore year, and I'm like, well, where is he at? And the case manager said, well, they just withdrew him. And I have a third student who had issues with showing up to school, poor attendance, failed all freshman classes. And the parents decided, well, we're just going to send him to Texas. He's going to start the new family business in Texas. So that's just, first of all, me not knowing all of the different things that go on within the building.
Mhm.
But that's
Mhm.
just three students that I know, that I have worked with, that parents have just decided, well, you know what, I'm just throwing my hands up. It is what it is, kind of. So
Yeah,
I
but
guess I'm curious as to where, what were your sources for the literature? I mean, where did you gather your information from?
so the lit review is for um, peer reviewed research articles is where the review comes from. So when we do the lit review, we comb through many different type of articles, but we only focus on research based, meaning that there was some kind of research that happened, some kind of data reporting back off of the research that was found. The majority of the research articles that I landed on were more qualitative interview based research studies. So it is the voice of the parents that we were pulling on to understand what was happening, right? So that's where the literature comes from. But I would push back on those first two scenarios that you talked about, where the parents pulled the kids out for various reasons. And I would say that that is a form of advocacy, right? That's a form of the parent trying to advocate for their children in the best way that they know how. And also understand that sometimes they don't know what all their options are or what potentially could happen if they choose this versus that. And a lot of that just boils down to their level of education of the educational system and how it can work in your benefit or to your detriment, right? And I think that's what the literature is trying to get us as educators to understand is that a lot of parents, and I feel like now more than ever, the majority of parents don't fit into the traditional box of what we see parents should be or how they should act or how they should maneuver. So and it's just about trying to best support them, in any way, shape, or form that we can so that they can get a good outcome for their students. Because at the end of the day, we all understand that no matter how we're moving towards it, the goal is to create a productive citizen that can navigate this world with all of us, right, in a productive way. And when we fail them, that's what we see is a failure in our society. So
Do you think the school is broke? The
I
system?
do. I do. Especially talking about Chicago public schools specifically. I mean, I also worked in the suburbs. We worked together,
Mm.
in District 218. And so, but I had a limited view of what that's like in that system. And I think that actually is what drives my thoughts and perceptions about Chicago public schools. I often compare it to there was a major energy company called Enron back in, I think, the 90s that everyone said, oh, Enron is too big to fail, but it failed and failed miserably, right? To the point where now there's documentaries about what happened within Enron and the failing of it and how it um, brought our economy to the brink, right, when it collapsed. But I feel like that Chicago public schools is too big to fail. It's too big. It's too much bureaucracy. It's too much, top heavy decisions made in the wrong spaces and places by the wrong people who don't really understand the impact that's happening in our local school communities. So I do think that the system is broken. I do. How to
I,
fix it, I don't know, because it's not just education, unfortunately, right? My sister was getting her PhD in social work, and she and I would have conversations all the time about, which came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it the culture? In the communities that's breaking it? Is it the society that we're living in that's breaking it? Is it the level of technology? Is it the education system? Like, if you fix one, will it fix the others? And it seems like there is no real hardcore fix. There is no go do this and everything will be fine, right? But I do think that if we are somehow able to make some impacts in what's wrong with education, we will see a modicum difference in our societies. I do. I think that there's a difference there, or
so
can be a difference.
have you seen a program where there is more success? Did your research ever find a
Mhm.
program where there was more success in parental involvement and changing from the traditional route of the
Mhm.
way that we teach? And I'm even thinking about like even the subject matters that we present.
Mhm.
Do they need to change? Do they need to because I know we discussed a while ago just how the start of education, where it started from, how it was all about just trying to create this society of workers and just
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
be in line and follow instruction. And my question is, do you think we're seeing a pushback of I'm not a machine. I'm not going
Mhm.
to just do what you say is the most is a value. I have opinions on my own of what I believe is valuable, and you're not addressing that. So therefore, I'm checking out of the system. I'm bucking the system, and I
Mhm.
rebuke the system. He's like, I got students that just come in the classroom like I have no intention of doing any work.
Oh
Period.
yeah, we
I
have one. Yeah.
your curriculum.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, to answer your first question, it wasn't in my research, but I did find a system that does seem to be working. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jeffrey Canada, but he started a charter school system in Harlem called, I want to say, it may be the Harlem Initiative or Harlem Project. But what he did differently, that what I think really is why his charter school works. Um, I'm not pro or anti charter. I'm pro if it works. I'm anti if it does not. Right.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, a lot of charters, they just say, hey, I have an idea. Let's see if it works. Right. And then they, break all these kids in the process of figuring out that that just doesn't work. But Jeffrey really had, excuse me, Mr. Canada, let me give him, and actually it's Dr. Canada. What his approach was kind of like what my sister and I talk about, right? Where he didn't try to go in and just address one part of it. He didn't go in just to address the educational system in these blocks of Harlem that he was centered in. It's a whole community approach. And it's where, in order to be a member of his school community, your family had to be a member of his school community, basically. And he would not just educate the children, but he was also educating the parents and how to be better parents, how to be better community members, how to, job training, workforce training, whatever it is that the community needed is what his organization kind of leaned into. And I think that's really where Chicago public schools, where we went wrong. When you look at desegregation, what desegregation did for us was it eroded the neighborhood schools. Because prior to that, everybody went, everybody in your neighborhood, you all walked to school, your teacher walked to school, you saw everybody at church, you saw everybody at the grocery store. But after desegregation, some got on a bus, teachers went other places, now don't live in my community, and it's not the same. And I know we just started a new reading initiative in my school, and I am like beyond over the top excited about it. And it's a program that was actually created in New York. I don't know exactly where, but I know it's in one of the bureaus in New York. And what makes me excited is that there's a parent component. So it's 8 weeks where we work with students 3 times for an hour after school, building their reading skills. But 4 weeks, there's an hour of parent instruction where parents come and we teach them how to support their students' understanding of reading at home. We remind them the importance of just reading, just, even if it's just reading the same book over and over again, how that builds fluency and different things that they can do. And I think that that's essential. Getting the parents involved in some way, shape, or form, and not in the superficial ways, right? There's a lot of talk about, oh, we have parental involvement. They come to the Black History Play, or they come to the spelling bee, or, we get half of them at report card pickup. That's very superficial. Actually, having them involved is giving them skills to help them support their students, which is a win-win for everybody. Because if parents are understanding, then we can understand. Our parents they're in our LSC. So in Chicago Public Schools, we have local school councils, every school does, where parents have to be a part of it. And they are begging us for math supports for them because they don't understand how to help their kids with math. And their kids are not well in math. We always historically score low on our standardized assessments in math, and they want to help. But I don't understand it. Like, it's no longer 1 + 1. I got to make a 10 to subtract. Like, what is this, right? And so we're trying to figure out how we can do that. But the impasse is always funding. Like, how do you pay for it? The reason we have this reading program was that we were granted it. Someone paid for us. And so we're trying to see if we can somehow figure out how to do that for a math program as well. But to answer your question about Jeffrey Canada, his school systems, I think that they are a great model. That I think if we leaned more into that, then we would see a shift in what's happening in our communities.
We have one comment where someone, Zaki, says that he would agree with you that parents choosing an alternative to traditional education system they feel is not serving their children is most certainly advocating for the betterment of their children. So I guess from I guess the cynic in me is saying, well, if they wouldn't work with us, what you think they're gonna work with you? And but that's not necessarily the truth. So, it's my cynicism of what I have seen from students up until this point. But I haven't seen everything. So, that's why I'm asking you what areas, and if you're telling me New York, that's not an area that's like what you would call it, a cakewalk, or you pick a real easy area to work in. Of course it works in that area. So that's encouraging. I guess what I would love if this conversation was heard by administrators to find out, because if we do continue to have parents choose another route, should we be taking the time to actually examine how we're presenting it? Because that what the way that we're presenting is not the end all be all. And I think coming to that realization is, it's kind of like this is how we've done it, and this is how it
Mm-hmm.
worked for us. So if you can't, get with it, then keep it moving. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot, that because it's about, like you said, the funding, the bottom line about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's a good point. So in
Mm-hmm.
your opinion, what are the biggest obstacles to parent involvement in educating students with disabilities?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest obstacle is trust. In my research, so there were four themes that came up, and one of them was about trust and collaboration, and we labeled it as a trust gap, right, between parents and educators, but not just parents and educators, but special educators and their colleagues, right, their coworkers, their admin, the parents that they support. But I think it really boils down into moving away from an us versus them type situation where, it was those parents versus, these are my partners. Like I tell my kids all the time, like, this is my teammate. Like, if you and I can't work together, I got to tap out. I got to call my other teammate in to help me out, right? Because they're my teammates. But I think it's interesting, even though, so what was enlightening to me in my research was because the educators that I spoke to were very candid. They were very open, which I really appreciate that. And a few of them shared things that they probably wouldn't have shared in any other setting about their own practices and how they approach working with parents who they perceive to be more involved versus parents who are not. And I think just thinking through that, to me, that caused a bit of concern because whether I perceive your parent as being involved should not impact how I provide services to you. And I think that in itself is where there's a disconnect because even though we don't think that our actions are being perceived in a way because maybe there are some biases there and that we don't think parents are educated enough to understand what we're doing, they see, they notice, and they are aware. My research for the dissertation solely focused on the lens from a special educator. But after I complete my doctorate, I do have plans on doing the opposite side of the research, which is talking to parents and getting their understanding and their insights into what we uncover by talking to the teachers. Because I do believe that we will find that parents are much more knowledgeable about what the actions are than we think they are. Like to kind of be clear on one of the things that's resonating in my head when I'm talking about this, there was a teacher who shared that she never, worked with a student on their IEP goals. She didn't gather any data. She didn't, when the report cards were due, she said they made progress. She didn't know if they did or didn't, right? Until she had a parent who came back and said, "What does that mean?" And then she was like, "Oh, let me start working on this goal." And she said, "I did it for that student and that student alone." And I'm like, trying to just, maintain professionalism through the conversation. But I'm thinking, oh my God, what? Because that's what we do. Um, but she said was early in her career. She was just trying to figure it out. She didn't know a lot of stuff. Um, but I think that's the key. It's like when we have in our head parents don't really know what's right and what's not, instead of finding a true moral compass of just doing the right thing to begin with, we lean into what's easy. And that erodes trust because parents know. They know. They do know. They know. And they may not have the confidence to start a conversation with you about it, or they may not have the time. Life may be lifing for them and they just don't have the time to address it, but they're aware. Or they may not, they may themselves, like I said before, just have, a perception of the educational system and they're not willing to engage with it. And I hate that. I hate that. One of the hats that I wear in school is the case manager. And I try to go above and beyond to let our parents know that I am here to support you. no matter how silly the question is, no matter what it is you need, if you want to talk for an hour about whatever, you can call me because you need an advocate through this process because you don't know all the different things that you should know or could know, or, it will be interesting for you to know. They don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
Well, I got a question for you.
Hmm.
Put your case manager hat on.
Okay.
Because I see the biggest obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles that I'm seeing with students just being able to help them be successful. Because I've always been of the mindset that if you show up to class, we good. You're gonna learn this material. I'm not gonna let
Hmm.
you not work. That's not
Hmm.
even gonna be an option. So all
Hmm.
I need you to do is mom and dad, just get them to school. Just get them to
Hmm.
school. And, the rest of it I'll handle. Now,
Hmm.
I had a parent who reached out to them, and I'm like, okay, we noticed that your child's attendance is it seems like it's taking a turn for the worse, and he's currently failing, 5 classes.
Hmm.
And it was the saddest conversation I had because she basically was saying, I don't know what to do. He doesn't talk to me.
Hmm.
He
Yeah.
doesn't. He doesn't even talk to me. And, I don't have money to send an Uber if he misses the bus. And
Hmm.
and I'm sitting here as like, but I'm going back to what you said, but you know this kid better than I do. You've had this
Hmm.
kid all of his life.
Hmm.
I've only known him for the past couple of years. But
Hmm.
it's as if you looking for me to be able to come up with some magic solution
Hmm.
to get him to school. And that to me seems to be the biggest obstacle that I'm facing with my students,
Hmm.
with seeing
Hmm.
them be successful is we can't you having a hard time, and it's I empathize with her because she's like, my son has no friends. My son
Hmm.
disconnected with everybody. He does it
Hmm.
on purpose. It's like he does not want to be involved.
Oh
And
yeah. Okay.
and he doesn't talk to me. So what can I do? Because I'm
Hmm.
trying to call her to ask her, can you get your kid to come to school? Because
Hmm.
as a case manager, I just want to let you know, his grades are being affected by his attendance, and his attendance seems to
Hmm.
be, you know. So what that, like I said, that would be my answer. My
Hmm.
was the biggest obstacle that you have with parental involvement in educating with children with
Hmm.
disabilities, because I definitely can't help your child if he already
They're
has a
not in
disability
school.
and he's not in
Yeah.
school.
Hmm. Yeah, so I two things for that. And the first one is that it sounds like the best advice to that parent is to see if there's some outside counseling they can tap into. Because if they're not talking to them, they don't have any friends, intentionally. At first, when you said, I said, oh, they're not in school, they can't make friends, they're not making those connections. But if he's intentionally not, he's not talking to parents, like that would concern me just on that social emotional level of what's really happening. And is this a level of depression that we're seeing that needs to be clinically diagnosed and addressed. So that would be my first advice to her, and then connect her with the school social worker who may have resources available in the community that they can tap into, and really try to get that parent to lean in. But the second half of that, the case manager within CPS for sure, but then within K-8 is different than like a high school case manager role. And I feel like we just do a lot of things that you might not be able to do at high school level because, well, we're smaller. But we have several students who fall into that category. They just cannot seem to get to school. Two of them specifically, one lives on the same block of the school on the other side down the street, and his friend lives on the same block, one street, like just you literally just cross the street like a little street. It's not even a
Mhm.
big street on the same, like a half a block from the school, both of them. And it's to the point now, we tried to work with the parents. We tried to, get them to understand the importance. Whatever. At this point, our dean, beginning of the day, goes down to their homes, knocks on the door. One of them, his mom is an overnight nurse. He has an older brother who is on the autism spectrum, who is severe. I think he has a comorbidity of something else, but he's very severe. He needs one-to-one support 24 hours a day. And so the student is often asked to support his brother during the nighttime while mom is at work. And so what
Mm.
happens is that he ends up just oversleeping the next day. And mom comes in about 9. She doesn't even know he's still in his room. She goes to lay down for a nap. Next thing she knows, it's 1 o'clock. They both waking up like, good morning, right?
Oh,
And so
wow.
once we kind of tapped into that and understood it, they were like, okay, we'll put a system in place. The dean will go down. The dean will knock at the door. Tyler, get up. Come on. It's time to go to school, right? And then once he gets him up, he stops to the next student's house. Let's go. We got to go to school. Y'all got to go. Come on, let's go, right? And that's working for us. But that's the community, right? That's the whole. It takes a village. We have another student who lives. So we are a neighborhood school, but a lot of our kids come to their parents intentionally bring them to our school, even though they no longer live in the neighborhood. Either their parents went to the school, their grandparents went to the school, somebody, there was a community at some point they came here. And so they want their kids to come to us because they know we're going to take care of their kids. And so we
Mm.
have a student who doesn't live anywhere near us. Just so happens our counselor has to pass by their home on the way to school. So now she picks the kid up, right? Like we're doing Ubers, right? It's like,
Wow.
but
Wow.
they're here, they're coming. That's what we need because at the end of the day, like the one parent who lives right across the street, he said, "Well, can you send the math book home?" I was like, "Sir, I can send the math book home, but he's not getting any instructions." I was like, hey, this is like Greek to him. I was like, he needs to be here. And so yeah, so so that's what we do. We really lean into that. We're a community. We're going to do what's needed to try to support our families as best we can, understanding that they all have a story. They
Mm.
all have a story. And I feel like I remember when I first started working at this particular school, I'm going on my 7th year here. And I was like, oh, it's just 1 or 2 kids have some odd story, right? No, it's every baby in my school has a story. And once I understood that, and once our admin team understood that, then we leaned out of the traditional ways to support our families, and we leaned into trying to find out of the box ways. Like, what can we do to support? And if that means taking a walk half a block down and knock on the door, then that's what we're going to do. Yeah.
Mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I applaud, just the fact that you all have that much vested interest in your population, and it's not so big that you can't be able to have those kind of one-on-one situations for students.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jealous, because I ran around that school that one day and I was like, well, he seems to care about this teacher. And so the one teacher talked to him and, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
career that he had an interest in. And then I went to the attendance personnel and I was like, well, can we offer some kind of incentive? And it just seemed like it didn't go anywhere. I mean, and I know part of it is me following up with it, but I didn't get a lot of return on my investment.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was it was a teacher that was putting himself out there, and it's kind of like, and oh, I'm sorry, mom also mentioned, and there's no father involved, and there's no male figure in
Mm-hmm.
the family, and I'm like, you telling me all of this? Like that's a lot, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as his case manager, how.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found the one male, and I need to, as I'm talking about him, I need to go back and check with him and find out. But I didn't see a change in his grades yet. So that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
a little disheartening. But
Well,
I'm
if he's coming to school, though, that's the big win. Just getting
yeah,
him back. Yeah.
yeah, I got to check on that as well. Because like I said, I
Mm-hmm.
used to have him in my class, and I would be able to see him on a regular basis. But sometimes I see
Mm-hmm.
him in the hallway, sometimes I don't. But I'm gonna take one more, have one more question for you. Then I would try to I wanted to find out, does anybody have any questions before I ask another one from the audience? So we've got about less than 15 minutes remaining. We usually try to leave the last 15 minutes for questions or comments. If not, then I have another question I could ask. Okay, so far, no comments or questions. All right, we'll move on to our next question. Why do you feel special education educators are leaving the field after 5 years?
Because it's hard.
That
It's
is,
hard. It's a hard job. Like it really is. Um, I remember actually working at Richards my first year, talking to the clerk one time, and she was like, "Well, um, how do you feel leaving your job to come to this?" And I said, it's the best. Like I love my job. Like it's the most rewarding, most fulfilling. Like I have no problems getting out of bed to go to work every day. But it is the hardest job I've ever had in my life. Hardest, hands down. It's a lot. It's not like so before, candidly, before I was a teacher, I remember CPS was getting ready to strike or something at the time. And I was like, what's the problem? What's the big deal? Like, why are y'all complaining? Just all you have to do is go into the classroom, teach the kids, call it a day, right? Oh Lord, no. Talk about walk a mile in my shoes. It's not that cut and dry. That we can't. Depending upon the day that I go to school, I am mom, I'm aunt, I'm grandma, I am nurse, I am social worker, I am case manager, I am friend, I am whatever they need in that moment. And they need a lot. And it takes a lot. You have to be a master of your craft in order to make sure you're doing right by them by giving them the information and knowledge that they need. But you also have to be, all those other things for them because they need it. And there is no way around it. There just isn't. And that's just being a teacher, right? Now add on special ed. So now I also have to understand, what's impeding you from being successful, having to uncover that, unpack that. It's like a puzzle, right? It's like a puzzle trying to figure out what piece fits for the right student in the right moment at the right time. And then being able to implement that into the education, and on top of that, as special educators, they want us to be a master of all. No, what is it? A jack of all trades, master of none, right? So my PEL, my professional educator's license comes with an LBS1, right? So that says that I can teach any student from pre-K all the way up to the day before their 22nd birthday in any subject. That's what they say. So I'm
hmm,
supposed to understand how to teach math, science, social science, ELA, writing, all in all grade levels. Some educators are able to narrow down, especially in high school. You get to narrow down a little bit and say, oh, I'm only teaching science, so I can kind of really learn and understand these top topics or subjects. But in elementary, you don't always get that. Like especially when you're in a small neighborhood school. Usually, when I was as a special educator, I taught sixth, seventh, and eighth, all subjects all subjects. And sometimes it was self-contained. So I had to teach all the content. Sometimes it's resource, meaning another teacher taught and I supported. But I still had to understand it all. And I had to understand the disabilities. And I have to figure out how to modify, how to provide accommodations, and deal with the emotionality, right? Because our babies come with a lot, and even now, even though I'm not a special educator, I'm constantly in a room with some kids talking about, okay, now tell me what happened. Let me help you out. Let me figure out how to support you going back into this classroom so you can sit and get some instruction. So it's a lot. It's a heavy load. It's not easy, and it's not for everyone. I say to be a special educator, you need to have an endless pit of patience. If you don't, it's not the right field for you. Our kids, they say in education, every kid gets a new day every day. Our kids need a new hour every hour. They need a new hour. You cannot allow them to press your buttons and then hold that grudge because it's a no-win situation. Nobody wins. You're not winning. They're not winning. We all just sitting around mad and nobody's learning, right? And so if that's and not, and I think especially so there's something called you can get an endorsement. So I have my master's in special ed. So I got all my instruction during my master's program was geared towards special education. But you could be an educator with just a general education license and take 4 courses and become an educator. And there are many people who are currently teachers who are like, oh, SPED's so easy. All they do is they take the kids out the room and they go color with them and they bring them back. That's all they do. I'm gonna go get these 4 courses and then I'm gonna become a special educator. Yeah, it's not that easy, right? You get in the role and they're like crying, like literally crying because it's hard. And it's like, yeah, what you thought we did, we don't do. That's not what we do. We educate kids. And we usually have the tougher kids that a lot of people aren't willing to support in their classrooms. Um, and so yeah, so that's why they leave. I mean, it is, and it's unfortunate. And so part of my pilot study was trying to figure out, like, how often are people leaving and what's happening. And as part of the research, the National Education Association in 2022 published a report where they polled all their members to see who planned to stay in the field and who was planning on leaving. And 55% of educators indicated they were going to leave within the next year or two, right?
Oh.
And that alone is an insurmountable number. First off, special education has had a deficit of teachers since the 70s. We have never been fully staffed when it comes to the need for special educators and the actual numbers we have in the role. The closest we got to it was in the 80s, but in the 90s, with the different things that were happening, that downward trend just went back downward and has stayed downward ever since. And so it has led different state educational agencies to find alternative ways to bring people to attract them into the field. That's where these 4 courses come from, right? Like, oh, give them the 4 courses and they can teach SPED. But it's not enough. It's not enough. And so they're trying to find ways. Some states, like Hawaii, at one point was giving people $20,000 bonuses to be a SPED teacher. In Illinois, we have the All-Cert programs. In Florida, you don't even have to have certification. You could just express an interest, especially if your husband was in the military, you can now be a special educator. Like, it's ridiculous. Some of these programs they put out to have people move into the field. And so that's why it's not surprising that they're leaving, because they don't really understand what they're getting into to begin with. But I think the bigger impact to what's happening with special education and what I see on a day-to-day basis, what I see in my research, what I see in talking to different educators about their intents to stay in the field, is the migration out of SPED, but still in education. Like, I
Mm.
myself, like, I'm one of those people, right? Where I didn't leave the field. I'm still in education. I plan to be in education until I retire, but I'm no longer a special educator. This year, I am still tied into SPED because I'm a case manager, but next year, my plan is to be fully gen ed. And so a lot of that, there's more of that happening than actual leaving the field. And that's a detriment. Like, I have a mentee this year, her first year teaching. She has her degree is in K2, so primary education, but she has her SPED endorsement. And so she's our self-contained primary special educator, and she's phenomenal. She's great. She's excellent, but she has 4 different instructional levels in her room. She only has 4 kids, but three different instructional levels. So that means she has to do 3 different sets of plans, right? Because you can't just mix them in and teach them in the middle. No, this kid needs instruction, this kid needs this kid. And it's a heavy lift. And so next year she wants to teach kindergarten.
Mm.
And so her reasons are, well, I'm new in my career. I want to try everything before I settle into one thing. Um, but at the end of the day, I know it's because it's a heavy lift. She thinks it's going to be easier in gen ed. And in some ways it is easier. But I hate it because I see her potential. She's amazing in her first year. And then the first year is when you make all your mistakes.
Mm.
When you hit your head up against the wall 12 times, you want to quit 50 times, but you keep coming back because you need to check. Right. And she's excellent, and she takes feedback and she really tries to understand the what and the why. Um, but she's leaving. She's going into genetics. So a lot of that is happening in our
We
field.
got time for one more question before we wrap this up. Um, what was the most surprising thing you discovered in your study?
That parents have absolutely no impact on special education teacher retention. Every educator, without a doubt, not one, not one. I was like, maybe there's one here who says, I stay because this parent impacted me, or I stay because this family resonated with me. They were all like, yeah, no, it has nothing to do with parental involvement. And they were all, in most of my respondents were all open to parents being more involved. They want more involvement, but they're like, if we don't get it, we don't get it, right? I'm still going to do my
Yeah.
job. I'm still going to lean into my kids. I'm still, going um, to continue to be the best teacher that I can be. But to be honest, I was surprised. I thought somewhere, I don't know, I thought maybe a little bit. And initially, we were going to do a study where we did a duo, or like a partnership, where we were going to identify special educators who have a close relationship with a parent or family, and then interview them both. We were going to have two individual interviews, one with the special educator, one with the parent, and then do a roundtable with both groups together to kind of talk through. But that's just a massive study, so it was too big for my dissertation. But it's definitely something I have in my back pocket for the future, because I think that will give me some more insights in how parental involvement is impacting a special educator in their role. But insofar as retention, nothing. They could care
Yeah.
less.
I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement. I know I
Yeah.
told you, I said if I was sticking around for the parents, I would have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really about if I don't, then who will? And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, let me be able to say that I gave it 110% and I tried to teach these students or give these students the same kind of educational experience I would want for my own. That's a big piece for me as a special
Mm-hmm.
education teacher. And like just being a model of consistency and a model of, you know, having expectations of from them, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you stop having expectations, I used to every now and then was like, we still gotta work on a Friday or we gotta work on and I tell them, I was like, who's your teacher? That's all I asked them. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, did
Mm-hmm.
you get who your teacher was?
Mm-hmm.
And those conversations have become few and far between because that's the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
We will be, you know, learning some materials. We're going to work on your
Yep.
comprehension. We're going to work on, being able to find the information within a text and apply it and be able to um analyze it and put it in your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the expectation in my classroom always.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I try to run it, what do you call that? Minute to minute. It's like from the beginning to the class,
Mm-hmm.
end of the class. It's
Bell to
like,
bell.
I got, yeah, bell to bell. I was like, I got one more
Mm-hmm.
for you. Last 10 minutes, I
Mm-hmm.
need you to do this, because
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
long as I have that rhythm, we got that rhythm going, then
Yep.
that's how we keep the momentum going. And that's how,
Mm-hmm.
we make progress in the classroom. So, all
Yeah,
right.
I know. Just quick. So on Wednesday when we had the snowstorm, and or whatever day it was after the snow fell. And of course, people were, struggling to get to work, get to school, and everything. We're in school in class, and the class starts, and it's probably like a third of my class there. And they're like, "Oh, so we're not doing anything today because most of the class is gone." And I was like, "No, so sorry for them. They're gonna miss out because we're learning. Like, if I'm here, we're learning."
Exactly. Exactly. And believe it or not, that is how the time passes a lot more.
Mhm. Oh yeah, oh
Truthfully, it
yeah,
does move a lot more quickly
hmm
if we're doing nothing. So,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I just don't get it. Well, I thank you so much, um, PhD candidate. I didn't want to keep calling you that. PhD
Yes, thank
candidate,
you.
Carla James, for
hmm
taking the time to discuss your dissertation with us
Yes,
and
absolutely.
just giving me some hope and and
Mhm.
even impressing upon me who's been in this field for 25 plus years that there's still more to be done and I still can work on doing my part to get parental involvement even if it doesn't
Mhm.
yield the results right away for me, that doesn't mean that I should stop.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
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 recognize it even if it's not what you think it should be. Recognizing that there is something there, that they are trying to be as involved as they can be.
yeah, and maybe
Hmm.
just even knowing like that you're not in this alone, and that I'm
Hmm.
in this with you, and and that support, sometimes that emotional support is more valuable than you could ever imagine. So,
Yeah, true.
all
Well,
right.
thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me
Yeah.
to
Thank
engage in this conversation. It was awesome.
I truly appreciate you. We're